think we're live now.
Yeah, it might take a couple, 20 seconds for some others to join as attendees, but people are joining now.
I see that participant number going up.
Looks like we're fairly stable, Colin.
Yeah, that's one. Okay. Give it another 15 seconds. It does look like we're stable. Okay, I think we can get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Colin Lang. I'm an environmental scientist, the Electric Safety Policy Division of the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety. The purpose of this public meeting is to take public and stakeholder comment on the 2022 Wildfire Mitigation Plan, WMP for short, guidelines. The 2022 guidelines are the requirements detailing the information the utilities must provide when submitting their wildfire mitigation plans. The draft guidelines were published by Energy Safety on November 9th. Energy Safety received comments on the draft 2022 WMP update guidelines on December 2nd from the following stakeholders: Musty Grade Road Alliance, Cal Advocates, the Utility Reform Network, Pacific Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, and the California Association of Small and Multi-Jurisdictional Utilities. Energy Safety considered these comments and published a revised draft on December 12th. This meeting will firstly have a public and stakeholder comment period during which participants may comment on the 2022 guidelines. After the public and stakeholder comment period has concluded, I will present the changes that have been made to the guidelines and then ask Melissa Semser, Deputy Director of Energy Safety, to formally adopt the guidelines. James, if we could move to the next slide and show the agenda. Are there any questions before we begin?
There's no hand raised.
Thank you, James. If there are no questions, we will move now into our public comment period. Please keep your comments limited to 4 minutes and use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or if you're a dial-in user, please press #2 to raise your hand and you will be unmuted in the order of raised hands.
The first hand raised is Mary Kay Benson. Mary, you should be able to I'm gonna have to promote her to panelist. She has an old version of Zoom and I can't unmute her currently, so give me a second. Mary, you should be able to unmute yourself now and make comment. Mary.
In Butte County on November 8th, we marked the 3 years since the Camp Fire storms devastated several communities here, including Paradise. For 3 years, I have been testifying before the CPUC, representing the more than 100 people in our county who have been killed by PG&E's reckless actions and deferred maintenance of their ancient, decrepit equipment in our high wildfire probability area. PG&E is a serial killer here and has pled guilty to 84 counts of manslaughter so far. I've pled to 3 CPUC presidents now, waiting online for hours to give what used to be minutes of public comments, telling you that we've lost 15,000 homes here as well, and that 30% of our homeless are wildfire survivors. Sometimes I've been given 1 minute to say that most of them are still due PG&E settlement money while the rains wash away their entire tent and belongings again and again. Their payments are tied to how well PG&E does on the stock market, and that's not well at all. Reducing our time for public comment fits the pattern of reducing the time the public gets to weigh in, even if we are a frontline wildfire disaster impacted community. It is very difficult to express in a few minutes and then watch as you, the public utility regulators, consistently vote against the public interests and always in favor of PG&E. That makes you all complicit and accountable in the PG&E murders here, while you still don't keep us safe. A new president could set a new precedent. The timelines on these plans are totally unworkable. Ability for the public to respond has moved from 60 days down to 27 in the midst of a pandemic and over the holidays. This is not meaningful public engagement. What's needed is a real strategy to engage fire survivors, people with disabilities like myself, and impacted communities like myself. The entire process needs to change. The Wildfire Mitigation Plan, which I testified against, still passed, even with all the flaws in it. What would it take to actually reject the plan and hold PG&E accountable? When dealing with a corporation that has proven its recklessness, its dishonesty and incompetence in keeping Californians safe, we need the default to change from trust them, trust you, regardless of who puts lives at risk. You have to prove to us that you can keep us safe, and so far you have not. What's needed is real accountability. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
All right, the next hand raised is Barbara Stebbins. Barbara, you should be able to unmute yourself and make comment.
My name is Barbara Stebbins. I'm with Local Clean Energy Alliance, and I'm calling in today in support of the Reclaim Our Power organization that is calling for you to reject PG&E's wildfire mitigation plan. It doesn't really matter how great a mitigation plan is if the implementation continually fails to keep the people of California safe. If, as regulators, you have no power to reject a mitigation plan on the basis of past failures of over 84 counts of felony counts against a corporation that clearly puts profit over the welfare of the people of California, that has 84 manslaughter counts against it, then there is no point to regulatory agencies. And we need to revamp the whole way in which this system works. PG&E is a serial killer. If you approve their wildfire mitigation plans, you are giving them a license to burn and a license to kill. We urge you, protect the people of California and fail PG&E where they deserve to fail. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
The next person at their hand raised is Matthew Carl. Matthew, you should be able to mute yourself.
Hi, good morning. My name is Matthew Carley. I am a senior analyst on the wildfire safety team at the Public Advocates Office, also known as Cal Advocates. On behalf of Cal Advocates, I'd like to thank Energy Safety for this opportunity to comment on your guidelines. Cal Advocates is still reviewing the revised guidelines and schedule that Energy Safety issued yesterday afternoon. However, the schedule appears to be much improved. We appreciate that Energy Safety revised the WMP schedule in response to the concerns of ourselves and others. As we stated in joint written comments with the Utility Reform Network and Must Grade Road Alliance, Cal Advocates had serious concerns with the 27-day proposed public comment period that in the original guidelines. Energy Safety has often cited the analysis of multiple stakeholder parties in your decisions on WMPs, and we believe that it's essential to adopt a schedule that provides enough time for stakeholders to continue making these important contributions, while also providing Energy Safety with the time that you need to perform your own in-depth analysis. The revised and improved WMP schedule will allow stakeholders additional time for discovery and analysis that form the basis of our recommendations. However, this is only going to be successful if the utilities comply with your 3-day discovery deadline. This is crucial because discovery is an iterative process. Responses from utilities often prompt additional questions and require further analysis. Thorough discovery often means multiple rounds of follow-up questions. Finally, I'd like to note that there are several areas where Cal Advocates does agree with the utilities. For example, PG&E proposed a number of technical clarifications, which we felt would benefit everyone by ensuring that the various utilities have a common understanding of WMP requirements. We also agreed with SCE that a geodatabase file provides more value than PDF maps, but that selective inclusion of maps in the text of the WMP can provide illustrative benefits. We appreciate that Energy Safety adopted these utility recommendations in the revised guidelines. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you, Matthew. Energy Safety always appreciates Cal Advocates' efforts and comments.
The next person that has their hands raised is only named as Reclaim Our Power. If you could state your name once we allow you to speak, that would be helpful. You should be able to mute yourself now.
Hi there. My name is Shayna Nanavati, and I'm with Reclaim Our Power. I stand with Cal Advocates Turn and the Must Grade Road Alliance to say that Energy Safety has not been providing meaningful opportunity for public comment. Today's meeting is a perfect example of this. OEIS staff has already decided to adopt the 2022 Wildfire Mitigation Plan guidelines before hearing what today's commenters have to say. Solely relying on uncompensated stakeholders before hearing does not make room for communities who don't have the resources to engage in your complicated and ever-shifting processes. And even those who are able to participate are being shut out. So it's good to hear that the timeline for public comment was revised. Originally, it was cut down from 52 days to 27 days. While Energy Safety staff continues to give yourselves the time that you need in order to keep delaying compliance deadlines when it benefits PG&E. Finally, since there's no other opportunity for you to hear our voices before you approve PG&E's 2021 safety certificate, I ask you today to reject the safety certificate and do what you need to prioritize Californian safety. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
That was the last hand raised. Oh, somebody just put their hand up. Pete Wobley. Sorry, I mispronounced your last name, but Pete, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Good morning, folks. Pete Wobley. Wobbly is close enough. I appreciate the effort. I am a long-term resident of Oakland, a breather of California air, a family member of people who've been evacuated from Sonoma County dozens of times over the course of the past many years, and an organizer with folks who are people with disabilities, fire survivors, low-income people, ratepayers, indigenous people, the folks who are bearing the brunt of yes, PG&E's recklessness and other IOUs' profit motive over valuing the the motive of protecting the public, but also bearing the brunt of the negligence and the inability or unwillingness, it's hard to discern which from this point of view, of regulators to take real, substantive, concrete, transparent action to keep us safe. I am a part of Reclaim Our Power, and we have witnessed over the past many years, during the bankruptcy, a PG&E's bankruptcy, when they came out, the governor, who now is the direct at the top of the food chain of the Office of Energy Safety, and every one of the CPUC commissioners, every one of them talked about the opportunity to actually hold PG&E accountable, to move us to a different era of protecting our families, protecting our communities, protecting our economy, protecting the least of us who are dependent on the energy system. And though there have been made diligent efforts, and I recognize the complexity of what this new office is trying to do and fill new roles and step into different spaces where it's never been done before in this country, it hasn't been good enough. And the ability of an organization like this is not to just say things are not working well. That we don't see a regulator's job simply to raise the flag. If you can look around in California, the flags are all over the place. There are no safe spaces from PG&E's negligence and valuing of profit over people. What we need is not just someone to point to the 59 different ways they should have failed the first plan, or all of the ways that they should fail their safety certificate upcoming, or the ones that they should have failed last year, or all of the ways that they're the ways that they caused the Kincaid fire and the Zog fire and the Dixie fire and the Fly fire and the Tubbs fire and the Woolsey fire for the other IOUs, all of these different ways. We don't need more evidence of what they're doing wrong. What we need is concrete, substantive action and recommendations from this body to stop them, to do something different. And sure, that means fines, but that also means structural changes to how our energy system works, and utilizing the 6-step process to its fullest, most aggressive piece, utilizing the governor's office and the office of the Department of Natural Resources, utilizing the Office of Energy Safety. Move forward and do what you are, what the public counts on you to do as public servants. We recognize and appreciate the expansion of the timelines, but we need meaningful public engagement, which means the public being able to count on you engaging us towards our safety, not towards the profit of a corporation. Appreciate your time. Thank you for your work.
Thank you for your comments, Pete.
And no other hands are raised currently.
Okay, if there are no other hands raised, we will close public comment period. Thank you all very much. We will move into the next part of our presentation. I will now present the notable changes to the wildfire mitigation plans. Please note that these are changes from the 2021 guidelines to the 2022 guidelines. Next slide. First, it is important to note that there are no notable changes to Section 1, Section 3, and Section 6. Next slide. In the introduction of the WMPs and the glossary, we have introduced a new naming convention that will hopefully standardize the file naming for submissions. And there is a new requirement, a general requirement for the utilities to use and include visual aids. We have modified the following. We've modified or added the following glossary terms: at-risk species, invasive species, / which was not previously defined in the guidelines, fire season, to note that fire season is often different throughout our very large state, frequently de-energized circuit per Senate Bill 533, and utility-related ignition, formerly utility-ignited wildfire. Next slide. In section 2, adherence to statutory requirements. The utilities must now provide the section and page number referencing the location where each statutory requirement is addressed. Hopefully this will be easier for energy safety and stakeholders to find that information, and a link to where is appropriate in the document as well. Pursuant to SB 533, Section 8 of the WMP newly requires the utilities to identify circuits with frequent wildfire mitigation related de-energizations, i.e. PSPS, public safety power shutoffs, and for the utilities to identify the measures they intend to take to reduce the need and impact of such de-energizations. Next slide. In section 4, lessons learned and risk trend, the utilities are newly required to provide the following visual aids: maps of the service territory and the CPUC high fire threat districts within their service territory, a map of red flag warning frequency and high wind warning frequency over the past 5 years, distribution of access and functional need customers within their territory, distribution of urban, rural, and highly rural customers, and identification of disadvantaged communities in their service territories. Next slide, please. For the WMP Section 5, inputs to the plan and directional vision. In Table 5.3-1, which is a list of the program targets over the last 5 years, the utilities must now include both the target and the performance of that target for past years. We have asked the utilities to provide vegetation management targets, which will be audited by Energy Safety pursuant to Public Utilities Code 8386.3. And the utilities are required for each target are required to provide a target percentage over top risk, which is the percentage of the target that will occur in high risk areas, to show stakeholders, the public, and energy safety that these targets are being prioritized and occurring in high risk areas. Next slide, please. In Section 7, mitigation initiatives, utilities are newly required to discuss how risk modeling outcomes are used to inform the decision-making process and to prioritize mitigation activities. Utilities are newly required to provide mapping in several different ways. There will be a GIS layer showing generalized wildfire risk, GIS layers showing the 2022 to 2024 plans for covered conductor installation, undergrounding, and electrical line removal. Another GIS layer for planned asset management and inspection mitigations in 2022. A GIS layer where enhanced clearances, which is defined as 12 or more feet, were achieved in 2020 and 2021, and where the utility plans to achieve those clearances in 2022. We have also asked for static maps showing where the utility will be prioritizing grid design and system hardening initiatives, such as undergrounding and covered conductor for 2022, 2023, and by 2032 as available. Next slide. Furthermore, in Section 7, utilities are newly required to provide maps demonstrating medium and long-term climate trends. They must describe how they incorporate these climate maps and climate trends into risk-informed analysis and decision-making processes, and provide additional details regarding the use of risk-informed methods to identify and prioritize risk mitigation. Utilities are required to report on the following new initiatives: vegetation management activities post-fire, and protective equipment and device settings. Next slide, please. In section 8, public safety power shutoffs. This was mentioned earlier, but again, pursuant to SB 533, utilities must identify circuits with frequent wildfire mitigation related de-energizations and identify the measures to be taken to reduce the need for and impact of such de-energizations. Utilities are also newly required to discuss how the relative consequences of PSPS and wildfires are compared and evaluated. Next slide, please, James. In section 9, the appendices, the following definitions for initiatives have been modified. Detailed inspections and management practices of vegetation clearances around distribution electrical lines and equipment. The same initiative, but for transmission electrical lines and equipment. Fuel management now includes all types of wood, not just slash. Slash is defined as under 4 inches in diameter. And recruitment and training of vegetation management personnel now requires a discussion of continuous improvement of training programs and of employees. Next slide, please. The appendix also asks utilities to further report on covered conductor and undergrounding. Utilities must report on covered conductor and undergrounding implementation, such as the methodology, key assumptions, decision-making processes, design implementation, long-term operations, and other relevant program activities. Next slide, please. Those were all the changes that were made from the 2021 to 2022 guidelines. The next 2 slides, I will briefly discuss the changes that were made using stakeholder comment from the initial draft published November 9th. To attachment 2, which is the guidelines template. Energy safety has removed forecasting and projections for 2023 for tables 3.2-1, which is the ratepayer impact, and 5.3, which is the performance targets. We have clarified the requests for spatial data and maps in 7.1, clarifying that for most of the mapping, we will ask for a geodatabase. We have removed the initiative weather-driven risk maps and modeling based on various relevant weather scenarios. This initiative was not defined in 2020 or 2021, and energy safety found it duplicative with other initiatives already defined. We have defined initiative protective equipment and device settings. We have reverted initiative 7.3.5.20 to its original title and definition used in the 2021 WMP guidelines to avoid confusion. We have defined the term enterprise system in the glossary. And we have clarified the expectations in GIS layers and mapping in section 7.1, asking for geodatabases rather than static maps. Changes to attachment 3, which is the non-spatial data tables. We have modified table 2 by removing the wind warning status where inappropriate. We have removed forecasting and projections for 2023 in tables 9 and 10. Next slide, please. There were additional changes to attachment 2 that did not specifically result from stakeholder comments. The phrase utility-related wildfire was replaced with utility-related ignitions for clarity. In table 5.3-1, which is the utility performance targets, we've added a column, as I discussed before, the target percentage and top risk percentage. We've deleted the columns underlying assumptions and update frequency and changed third-party validation to audited by third party, yes or no. We have added additional guidance for this table in section 5.3. In attachment 5, which is the process document, energy safety has extended public comment period for the WMPs. In the draft, it was 27 days. It is now 45 days after the last submission, which is PG&E. We have clarified the quarterly data report submission schedule, and we have changed the utility WMP submission date, workshop dates, stakeholder comment deadlines, and other associated dates and deadlines. Corresponding changes were made to attachment 1, which is a summary of the changes that have been made, and no changes were made to attachment 4, the maturity model. Next slide. Now that I have gone through the changes to the 2022 guidelines, I will now pass it to Melissa Semser and ask her to officially adopt the guidelines.
Thank you, Colin, and good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Semser, and I serve as the Deputy Director of the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety, or Energy Safety, as we call ourselves for short. Thank you, Colin, for the presentation on the proposed changes to the draft 2022 WMP guidelines. Thank you also for the comments from the public and for stakeholders. We value your feedback and we do consider your feedback, and we appreciate what you have to say. I want to highlight today that these are the guidelines, which are the beginning of the process for the WMP cycle. So this is not approving any plan or any action by the utility at this point. This is setting forth what it is that they need to submit, and so that we can evaluate the actions that they're taking for 2022. So this portion of the public meeting is where we consider adoption of the guidelines. And this is pursuant to Government Code section 15475.6. That section of the Government Code in summary states that energy safety must adopt guidelines setting forth the requirements, format, timing, and any other matters related to exercise its powers, perform its duties, or meet its responsibilities at a publicly noticed meeting where the office presents proposed guidelines or amendments and allows all interested stakeholders and members of the public an opportunity to comment. As noticed, as Colin stated, in addition to the public meeting held here today, we released the draft guidelines in mid-November, and we did accept written comments from stakeholders. 2022 is the last year in the first 3-year WMP plan cycle undertaken by Energy Safety, formerly the Wildfire Safety Division, pursuant to Assembly Bill 1054. As such, Energy Safety seeks to enable continuity of comparison across the 3 years, wherever possible, while also allowing for greater visibility into the electrical corporation's plan mitigations, a deeper understanding of the underlying risk modeling, and a more granular and specific view of mitigation activities. Year over year, we seek to push the electrical corporations forwards towards maturing their mitigation activities, with the goal of reducing utility-related emissions that result in catastrophic wildfires. Energy Safety has considered all the feedback received, both in written comments and the comments here today, which we appreciate, in considering the adoption of the guidelines. On balance, the draft guidelines as revised should result in 2022 WMP updates that better enable Energy Safety to effectively evaluate each electrical corporation's wildfire mitigations, including ensuring that the utilities are targeting mitigations in the highest risk areas and taking actions to reduce PSPS, public safety power shutoff events. In addition, the revised guidelines provide for both dynamic and static maps, graphs, and charts that will allow Energy Safety stakeholders and members of the public to better visualize both wildfire risk and proposed mitigations. The revised guidelines also further clarify some of the requirements for the utilities, and they add new definitions to the glossary and provide additional specificity to existing glossary definitions. And finally, the revised timeline as presented today enables energy safety and stakeholders to undertake review in a way that maximizes the efficiency of resources while allowing for a more focused review of each plan. We recognize that this timeline is difficult for everyone. It is a short period of time, and it squeezes everyone. It squeezes the utilities, it squeezes us, it squeezes the stakeholders, it squeezes the general public, and we are trying year over year to find a path forward that provides as much time and space for all stakeholders and all entities that are involved in this process to be able to participate. So now move to the portion where we adopt the guidelines. Pursuant to Government Code 15476.6, Energy Safety hereby adopts the revised 2022 WMP guidelines effective today, December 14th, 2021. Energy Safety will issue the final guidelines tomorrow on December 15th. We will place the final guidelines on the WMP docket card. We will serve the documents to the WMP docket listserv, and we will post the final guidelines on our website, which is www.energysafety.ca.gov. The 2022 WMP cycle will begin on February 11th with the first submission. Thank you to everyone involved for your efforts as we continue to move forward. And with that, if there is nothing further, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for your participation.